July 3, 1976. Inside Lewisburg Federal Penitentiary, an inmate sits on his cot, scribbling across a yellow legal pad. He's serving a 25-year sentence for espionage, the most devastating breach in CIA history, having sold 14 deep-cover agents to the Soviets and dismantled an entire intelligence network. Confined in a 6-by-9-foot cell with no phone, no visitors, and mail screened by 3 separate agencies, the CIA crafted his captivity to ensure he could never communicate again. Yet, despite these constraints, he runs an operation using letters, library books, and one unwitting guard, feeding disinformation to Langley that misdirects CIA counterintelligence for 4 years. Every false lead, every wasted resource, can be traced back to a man with nothing. The agency spent $2 million trying to unravel how a prisoner with no tools, no staff, and no freedom was manipulating them. Behavioral analysts, cryptographers, and congressional overseers could not explain it, and by the time they began to, the damage was catastrophic. 3 operations burned, 2 governments compromised, and a decade-long mole hunt launched in confusion. How did a man with nothing outsmart the most powerful spy agency on Earth? And what did the CIA uncover when they finally pieced together his method? Edwin Paul Wilson was born on May 3, 1928, in Nampa, Idaho, into a poor farm family, raised with newspapers and odd jobs that taught him to watch adults closely and wait them out. He became a merchant seaman, learning to solve problems with whatever was bolted to the deck. After earning a psychology degree from the University of Portland in 1953, he joined the Marines and served in Korea after the peak of the war had passed. But before life could settle into normalcy, a small hinge swung open a huge door. Flying home, he struck up a conversation with a stranger who suggested he might be suited for a particular kind of work. Wilson wrote down a number, and in 1955, the day after his discharge, he joined the CIA. His skill was not charisma or charm but logistics, the unglamorous backbone of intelligence. While others pursued dazzling tradecraft, Wilson mastered the mundane machinery that makes espionage function: paper trails, shipping routes, and front companies that were real businesses with a hidden secondary purpose. They filed taxes, hired employees, and owned trucks, ships, and office furniture. They looked ordinary on purpose. Behind the invoices, they moved information and equipment without leaving fingerprints. Wilson excelled at making the fake look real because he first made the real look unremarkable. In CIA terms, this was cover, a mask that survived scrutiny, not just a casual glance but audits, background checks, and hostile surveillance, one a person could inhabit for years without cracking. He became what the agency valued most, a man able to operate in the gray zone between legal and deniable, where official policy ends and operational necessity begins, and where a single misstep could be catastrophic. It was a place where paperwork told one story and phone calls told another, a network of unseen consequences, a realm few could truly understand. In early 1971, he officially left the CIA, but immediately and quietly he began working for naval intelligence in a classified unit called Task Force 157. Different letterhead, same shadows. Wilson ran companies, ran contacts, ran deniable operations. The CIA maintained personal and professional ties even after his departure. The lines blurred until there were no lines at all, just people who knew each other and called when they needed something moved, sourced, or made to disappear. By the mid-1970s, the gray zone had taken full color. Wilson had assembled an empire, more than 100 corporations across the United States and Europe, an apartment in Geneva, a hunting lodge in England, a townhouse in Washington, D.C., real estate in North Carolina, Lebanon, and Mexico, a seaside villa in Tripoli, and 3 private planes, with a net worth later estimated at $23 million. He bragged that he knew Concorde flight attendants by name. On paper, he was a businessman with frequent flyer miles. In practice, he was a bridge, a human connecting rod between what Washington wanted and what it could not openly pursue. Bridges attract traffic, and traffic leaves tracks. Every handshake, every visit, every story told over scotch became a potential trace, a potential witness, a line that could be quoted in a courtroom years later. Wilson's profile grew, and with it, the danger nested inside the legend. The harder it becomes for the agency to pretend he never existed. His guest list reads like a roll call of classified influence: congressmen, generals, CIA leadership, and one name surfaces repeatedly: Theodore "Ted" Shackley, a senior covert operations officer nicknamed the Blonde Ghost, a familiar presence in Wilson's orbit by multiple accounts. Then comes the assignment, at least Wilson's version. He later claims Shackley asked him to go to Libya, not to sell weapons, but to watch, to monitor Carlos the Jackal, the Venezuelan terrorist under Libyan protection. Wilson travels to Tripoli in the late 1970s, stepping into a world of oil, money, weapons, and a regime the United States both despises and needs to understand. On paper, he arrives as a businessman. In practice, according to his own defense, he operates as an intelligence source. He believes the institution that trained him and built his mask will protect him. He is wrong. The moment his work becomes inconvenient, the same people who thrived in the gray zone pretend it never existed. What does a man do when his entire identity is deniable? How do you prove a relationship designed from the first handshake to be unprovable? Former associates begin talking to investigators, the kind of testimony that turns a secretive operator into a headline. Kevin Mullahay, a former partner, becomes a key source on Wilson's Libyan dealings. At first, Mullahay believes their work is protected by U.S. intelligence. The operations feel sanctioned, coordinated, official. Then something shifts. The work ceases to feel like cover and starts to feel like crime. Mullahay even recalls that Wilson mentioned Libya plans in Shackley's presence, while Mullahay was in the room. Over time, according to declassified accounts, what once seemed like legitimate cover begins to look like private enterprise. Mullahay goes to the authorities. In Washington, prosecutors assemble a case. In the press, Wilson becomes a character: rogue spy, death merchant, renegade. The CIA's public response is immediate and total. We don't know him. He left in 1971. Anything after that is his problem. The sudden erasure is like a corporation deleting a colleague from the group chat. The silence, the coordinated story, everyone pretending not to know the name. Now imagine that on the scale of an intelligence agency, where the deletion carries handcuffs and prison cells. Wilson is indicted, but he remains in Libya, a country that does not extradite. He is protected by a regime that could just as easily kill him, abandoned by the very government that once fed him classified briefings, trapped in a limbo of danger and uncertainty. It is a claustrophobia of a special kind, where the sky is wide and the exits are zero. Then the Justice Department finds the leverage Wilson needs to tempt him out. Ernest Kaiser, an old contact described in reports as a man with shadowy CIA connections. Kaiser offers a deal, flies to the Dominican Republic, and presents a National Security Council arrangement that promises to make Wilson's legal problems vanish. It is a sting. Wilson boards a plane for the Caribbean, believing freedom is within reach. On June 15, 1982, he lands in Santo Domingo. Dominican officials refuse him entry, and U.S. Marshals wait on the tarmac. The trap snaps shut like a steel door. The man who spent years constructing escape routes for others walks straight into one built for him. Back in the United States, a judge sets bail at $20 million, a figure unprecedented at the time. That number is not bail, it is a message: he is not going anywhere. The scale of the setup, the sudden reversal, the betrayals from former allies, all paint a picture that seems almost unbelievable. Every layer: foreign protection, legal maneuvering, government complicity, public erasure, underscores the paradox of a man trained to live in shadows being trapped by the very institutions that once protected him. Then the trials pile up. In Washington, D.C., he is charged with soliciting the murder of a Libyan dissident, acquitted. In Virginia, illegal exports of firearms, including one later linked to an assassination in Bonn, convicted, the sentence later reduced 15 years afterward. In New York, murder for hire conspiracy, convicted again, with 2 prosecutors, multiple witnesses, and even his own wife listed as alleged targets. Finally, Houston brings the case that will define his identity: the export of roughly 20 tons of C4 plastic explosives to Libya in 1977. Wilson's defense is the same as always: CIA cover. The prosecution cannot stop him from telling his story, so it attempts to prevent the jury from believing it. Lurking in the background is a peculiar technical law, the Classified Information Procedures Act, or CIPA, designed to keep defendants from forcing the government to reveal secrets in open court. The government calls it protection, defendants call it shackles. Either way, it ensures the most dangerous evidence stays off the table. When authority fails, the government reaches for the Briggs affidavit, a paper knife slicing through his defense. It declares, in essence, there is no CIA relationship after 1971. Read it. Believe it. Convict. The jury reads it, a second time, and convicts. By early 1984, Wilson's sentences merge into a single 52-year term. He is sent to Marion, Illinois, placed in solitary confinement 23 hours a day. A man who once hosted power now counts ceiling tiles. Yet a contradiction keeps him alive. If the CIA truly had no meaningful contact with him after 1971, why is the government so desperate to keep its own files about him sealed? What is in those vaults worth more than burying a man alive? Marion is not merely a prison, it is a machine designed to shrink people. Built for the most dangerous federal inmates, it operates on a simple principle. Complete isolation provides complete control. The architecture itself is a weapon, eliminating every variable that makes a human feel human. Permanent lockdown means inmates spend 23 hours a day in steel and concrete cells, meals sliding through a slot, human contact reduced to transactional moments. Wilson later recounts enduring 10 years of this. 10 years where the day's highlight is the sound of keys and the brief, humiliating ritual of being counted. Outside, the world erases him. His wife divorces him, citing the impossibility of loving a ghost. His sons cut contact, whether from shame, survival instinct, or exhaustion. The result is the same. He is gone. The IRS seizes his properties, auctioning off the physical remnants of his former life piece by piece. The bitter arithmetic is stark. The same government that insists he was not working for them also confiscates everything he built while allegedly not working for them. Wilson has no leverage left. No money, no influence, no dinners with congressmen, not even the luxury of being believed. Every claim sounds like desperate fiction, the words of a convicted spy trying to rewrite his own history. So he reaches for the only weapon the system permits: paper. He acquires a typewriter, its keys stiff, every strike a harsh friction against the wall of confinement. He begins filing Freedom of Information Act requests, FOIA, a law that allows ordinary citizens to demand government records. In theory, it is democracy's flashlight shining into dark corners of bureaucracy. In practice, it is a flashlight with dying batteries, passed through regulations and slots by people determined that you will not see. Requests must be surgically precise. Appeals must be timely. Denials arrive coded in bureaucratic dialect he learns to translate. Exemption means trust us, redaction means you are not seeing this, national security means go away. Prison shapes a man with an ego into meticulousness, forcing patience, precision, and relentlessness in equal measure. He builds his case one document at a time, like a prisoner digging a tunnel with a teaspoon, slow, grinding, relentless. He files requests denied, redacted, delayed under national security. No responsive documents arrive. Years pass. The Reagan administration ends. The Berlin Wall falls. The Soviet Union dissolves. The enemy Wilson allegedly betrayed no longer exists. The geopolitical landscape that justified his imprisonment has entirely transformed. Wilson types through it all, measuring time not in historical events but in pages filed, denials received, appeals pending. He types through the decades. Sometimes he sues, and sometimes he wins. Fragments leak out, a memo here, a date there, enough to keep the chase alive, because he is not chasing a theory. He is chasing a specific lie, the Briggs affidavit, 3.5 pages that sentenced him to die. Judge Lynn Hughes would later describe the government's behavior as a shell game, walnut shells shifting constantly, hoping the pea would never be found. The metaphor reads as comic until you remember the pea is a human life. After more than a decade of relentless filing, a crack appears, a Justice Department memorandum titled Duty to Disclose Possibly False Testimony. It is not written for Wilson but for the people deciding whether to tell the truth. The memo declares the Briggs affidavit inaccurate, not maybe, not arguably inaccurate. Someone scribbles in the margin, the plain meaning of services makes the affidavit inaccurate. 3 days after Wilson's conviction, the government privately acknowledges the evidence that convicted him was wrong, yet tells no one. Not him, not the judge, not the jury. Most people stop there. A prisoner with a memo is still a prisoner. Wilson does not. He uses the memo as a crowbar, filing motions to vacate, forcing courts to look again. He keeps writing because writing is the only way to move inside a cage. Then a federal judge in Houston, Lynn Hughes, does something small that changes everything. He does not free Wilson, but he appoints counsel, creating a doorway into the classified world Wilson cannot reach alone. The truth Wilson needs is not in his cell, it is locked in government vaults. How much damage can a court-appointed lawyer with a security clearance do to a 20-year-old lie? David Adler enters the story. A Houston attorney, and by multiple accounts a former CIA officer, he carries the one thing Wilson has been denied for 2 decades: security clearance to read classified files. The ultimate irony is that Wilson spent his career building those files, and now he needs someone else's permission to prove they exist. When Adler reveals his CIA background, Wilson explodes. He trusts no one with agency fingerprints on them, not after what happened, not after seeing the institution that trained him, deployed him, and profited from him systematically erase every trace of their relationship. But Adler does not argue, he waits. In prison, patience is the only currency the system appreciates. The court eventually orders access. Adler sits in a Justice Department vault, a windowless room stacked with manila folders and classification stamps, filled to the ceiling with decades of intelligence bureaucracy. He reads thousands of pages on Edwin Wilson, meticulously noting each reference, cross-checking names, dates, and operations. The paperwork tells a story the jury never heard, revealing a shadow world of contacts, requests, and missions hidden behind layers of secrecy, redactions, and procedural hurdles, a labyrinth of proof waiting for recognition. After 1971, long after the agency claimed it had cut him loose, Wilson maintained at least 80 documented professional contacts with the CIA or other U.S. intelligence channels. Shackley asks him to acquire a Soviet missile. Another request involves finding housing for a Oceanian general who had once served the agency. Someone else asks for anti-tank weapons for a sensitive operation. Each file, each note, exposes a network the jury had never been allowed to see. Discussions even surface about using him for desalination projects in Egypt. Whether Wilson is seen as honorable or monstrous, that list carries one devastating implication. The Briggs affidavit cannot be a good faith mistake. It is a deliberate narrative choice, and it gets worse. Before the Houston trial, internal CIA documents acknowledge continuing personal and professional relations with Wilson after his resignation, identifying incidents that could support a defense showing he conducted post-resignation activities for the agency. The document warns its list is not exhaustive. The CIA knew before trial, and prosecutors had at minimum access to discussions and documents contradicting the zero-contact story. The jury deadlocks and requests the affidavit. The judge reads it, the holdout flips, and Wilson is found guilty. That paper functions as a weapon not because it is persuasive but because it is authoritative. A bunker in Virginia contradicts a man in chains, and 12 citizens believe the bunker. Then comes the cover-up that turns a procedural failure into scandal. The affidavit is drafted in Houston in early February 1983. The jury convicts on February 5. Within days, CIA personnel question its accuracy, and Justice Department lawyers circulate the duty to disclose memo. The government talks about correcting the record and chooses silence. Not after trial, not before sentencing, not on appeal, not for years. When officials are finally cornered, their argument borders on comic audacity. Yes, the affidavit is inaccurate, but it was not intentionally false, and even if it was, it is irrelevant unless Wilson can prove the CIA specifically authorized the explosive shipment. It is a no-win cage. Proving the lie does not automatically free him, it only proves he was convicted inside a rigged frame. Adler files the motion anyway, a direct accusation. The guilty verdict was obtained through knowing use of false evidence and suppression of favorable evidence. The fight collapses onto one desk, one judge, one decision, yet the system holds all its defenses: delay, classification, national security, the slow violence of time. After 20 years, can one prisoner's paperwork force a court to say the quiet part out loud, or will the machine simply wait until the man inside it stops breathing? On October 27, 2003, Judge Lynn Hughes issues a 29-page opinion in United States v. Wilson. It reads less like procedure and more like a moral alarm. He does not say the evidence is messy. He states plainly that the government knowingly used false evidence and suppressed favorable evidence. He orders the conviction vacated. In those pages, a federal judge dismantles the credibility of the most powerful intelligence agency on earth, writing that America will not defeat terrorism by double-crossing a part-time, informal government agent. He refuses to let the blame hide inside a single prosecutor's ignorance, calling out institutional rot directly and identifying roughly 24 government lawyers who participated in creating the false story, hiding contradictory material, and refusing to correct it across 2 decades. This is Wilson's victory, the obscene promise he made himself in solitary confinement fulfilled. The typewriter beats the affidavit. The Justice Department declines to appeal or retry. The case that branded him a traitor collapses under the weight of its own paperwork. But victory does not rewind time. Wilson still carries other convictions. The system never fully returns his life. It only admits that one part of the machine was cheated. On September 14, 2004, Edwin Wilson walks out of federal prison after roughly 22 years inside. He is 76. He does not emerge to an empire. The acreage is gone, the portfolio liquidated, family ties damaged beyond repair. The man who once knew Concorde flight attendants by name now lives near Seattle on a monthly Social Security check of $1,080. He is not just older, he is stripped to essentials, breathing, paperwork, and a stubborn need to be more than the label they pinned on him. He tries to make them pay. He files a civil lawsuit against the people he says framed him: federal prosecutors, Justice Department officials, and Briggs himself. Some of the men he names have since become federal judges. In March 2007, U.S. District Judge Lee Rosenthal dismisses the suit, not because the conduct was noble, but because the law shields them under absolute prosecutorial immunity. Even if officials acted improperly while carrying out prosecutions, the law protects them. In plain English, even if officials acted improperly while carrying out prosecutions, they cannot be sued for it. On appeal, the Fifth Circuit affirms that the defendants are immune for conduct related to the prosecutions and related proceedings. That is the system's final trick. It can admit it lied and still ensure no one pays, not a dollar in damages, not a single career derailed. The 24 lawyers Judge Hughes named go on with their lives. Some retire with pensions. Some sit on the bench. The man they helped bury collects Social Security. Wilson keeps working after the dismissal, organizing documents, filing appeals on remaining convictions, drinking black coffee, still reconstructing a life from paper. He tells reporters he feels no guilt, that he did not hurt anyone, that he did not get anyone killed. Even David Korn, Ted Shackley's biographer, offers the line that captures the whole grim paradox. They framed a guilty man, and then time finishes what prisons start. On September 10, 2012, Wilson died in Seattle at 84 from complications following heart valve replacement surgery. 22 years in prison, 8 years of freedom, 76 years of being someone the government could use and then deny. His nephew says the biggest part of his vindication is simple. The traitor label is finally gone. A man trained to live in secret, erased by secrets, then forced to spend 22 years proving that the secret was a lie. He wins the battle. The system wins the war. And it leaves behind a question, heavy and loaded like a weapon on a table. If the rules can be bent far enough to destroy one of their own, what happens to a man who knew the names, held the files, and hosted the generals?